People often imagine that religion began as a response to life's deepest questions about existence, death, and meaning. But when we look at history, a different picture emerges. Religion was never just about belief. It was also about power and control. It didn't grow quietly like an innocent idea. Instead, it was shaped, refined, and spread by those in authority, rulers, priests, and elites who saw in it a powerful tool to manage people and secure their own position. From the very beginning of civilization, religion was used as a tool to legitimize political authority. Kings in Mesopotamia claimed they were chosen by the gods, while Egyptian pharaohs were even regarded as divine beings themselves. Disobedience, therefore, was not just political rebellion. It was blasphemy. This pattern repeated throughout history. Secular power and religious power became tightly intertwined, reinforcing one another to preserve social order. When legal codes were established, they were often framed in religious terms. From the Code of Hammurabi to the Ten Commandments to Sharia law, serving not only as moral guidelines, but also as mechanisms to protect the interests of the ruling elite. Religion, then, was never merely a matter of personal faith. It became an integral part of political machinery, transforming obedience into a sacred duty. In many civilizations, political power was not built solely on military strength or legal authority, but was reinforced through the deification of leaders. Kings, emperors, or religious figures were often seen as chosen ones, or even as the earthly embodiment of divine will. This created a unique mechanism. Obeying the leader was not just about following a person, but about submitting to the will of the gods. Any act of resistance was treated as both illegal and sacrilegious, punishable by political authority as well as religious condemnation. Such deification made leaders nearly untouchable. It established a self-reinforcing cycle of power. Political authority was legitimized by religion, while religion was safeguarded by the might of the state. Throughout history, religion was not only a spiritual force, but also a center of knowledge and control. The clergy, those with access to sacred texts and doctrines, gradually became the gatekeepers of knowledge. They determined who was allowed to study, interpret, and transmit the meanings of scriptures. This monopoly reinforced their power, as limiting access to knowledge forced the masses to depend on the clergy for truth and guidance. By controlling how religious texts were interpreted, they could shape beliefs and ensure compliance with rules and laws proclaimed in the name of the divine. In this way, religion functioned not just as a spiritual system, but also as a structure of authority, where knowledge was weaponized as a tool to maintain obedience and preserve social order in favor of those in power. In many periods of history, law and religion were not separate but closely intertwined, often merging into one. Religious rules were frequently incorporated into legal systems, while laws themselves were legitimized by divine authority. This created a dual mechanism of control. Breaking the law was not only considered an offense against the state, but also a sin against the divine. As a result, punishments carried both political and spiritual weight, making them far more severe and inescapable. Through this fusion, rulers could more easily maintain social order and reinforce their authority. Religion provided legitimacy to the law, while the law protected religion from challenges and opposition. Together, they turned religion into a powerful tool for sustaining order and controlling human behavior. The Middle Ages in Europe marked a period when the Catholic Church held near absolute authority, not only in matters of faith, but also in politics, law, and daily life. The Church became the center of knowledge, as most books, education, and scholarship were controlled by monasteries and clergy. Spiritual authority was tightly bound to secular power. Kings needed papal recognition to legitimize their thrones, while the church relied on royal power to secure its influence. One of the church's most feared weapons was excommunication, which could isolate a king or even an entire nation from the Christian community. This fusion of religious and political power turned the church into an almost unchallengeable force, dominating the spiritual lives, thoughts, and even destinies of millions of people. During the age of exploration and colonial expansion, religion, especially Christianity, became a powerful tool to justify imperial conquest. Missionaries often traveled alongside explorers and armies, presenting their work as a sacred mission to enlighten and convert native peoples. But behind the facade of faith was a deeper agenda: the suppression of indigenous traditions, the dismantling of local belief systems, and the consolidation of European control. Conversion campaigns didn't just aim to change spiritual beliefs. They reshaped cultural identities and created obedience to new rulers. In the end, countless native communities lost both their heritage and autonomy, as religion and colonial power worked hand in hand to secure domination. Even today, the bond between religion and political power hasn't disappeared. Many leaders and governments still use religious language, symbols, and authority to reinforce their own legitimacy. When a policy is framed as God's will or tied to sacred values, it becomes nearly immune to debate. Opposition isn't just seen as political dissent anymore. It's condemned as a moral failure. Religious institutions also benefit from state support. Funding, legal privileges, and influence over areas like education, law, and social life. In return, political leaders gain a powerful tool for shaping public thought and behavior. When political power and religious authority join forces, the result is often the suppression of free thought, the obstruction of social reform, and the preservation of systems that favor those at the top. This isn't just a relic of the past. It's still shaping the world we live in today. One of the most powerful weapons institutional religion has ever wielded is fear. When people are taught that disobedience will not only bring punishment in this life, but eternal torment in the next, they become far easier to control. Fear of losing salvation, of eternal damnation, or of divine wrath acts as an invisible chain, stronger than any physical restraint. Alongside fear comes guilt, the constant reminder that you are flawed, unworthy, and always indebted. The cycle of sin, confess, atone keeps believers trapped in dependence, never fully free. Instead of promoting self-awareness or true inner growth, guilt is weaponized to keep people tied to priests and institutions who claim the power to forgive or absolve. Together, fear and guilt produce submission. When people are told that doubt is dangerous and resistance is blasphemy, submission is no longer a choice. It becomes a supposed virtue. Obedience to religious and political authority is reframed as sacred duty, as though bowing down were the natural order of the universe. These three tools, fear, guilt, and submission, don't just regulate behavior. They shape a believer's identity and thought. And once people come to see their own subjugation as holy, the system no longer needs visible chains to keep them in line. A recurring feature throughout the history of many religions is the justification of inequality. Instead of liberating people, they often reinforced systems of class, gender, and social hierarchy. Women were placed in roles of submission, excluded from leadership, and denied a public voice. Marginalized groups, from slaves and the poor to ethnic or religious minorities, were often branded as inferior or sinful, according to standards set by those in power. By framing discrimination as divine will, Religions turned oppression into something sacred. The poor were told to accept their fate. Women were told to obey. Those who were different were pushed to the margins of society. Many religions even established laws that entrenched injustice, rules on inheritance, marriage, and social roles, consistently favoring the interests of the elite. As a result, instead of being a force for fairness, religious systems often became tools of exclusion, making it even harder for the vulnerable to escape oppression. This wasn't eternal truth. It was a strategy of power wrapped in sacred language. One of the least discussed yet most critical aspects of religious history is the manipulation and control of sacred texts. What we now recognize as Holy Scripture or divine revelation did not emerge untouched or complete. It went through multiple stages of selection, editing, and even deliberate omission. Religious councils, clergy, and ruling authorities decided which books would be preserved, which ideas would be erased, and which doctrines would be declared orthodox. This means that religious texts were never just records of spiritual belief. They were also shaped to serve political interests and power structures. Views that challenged the existing order were often branded heresy, destroyed or distorted to neutralize their impact. By controlling Scripture, elites created an intellectual monopoly, ensuring that only the stories, laws, and interpretations that reinforced their authority survived. Religion, in this way, became more than belief. It became a tool for reinforcing systems of control, legitimizing power, and silencing alternative visions of truth or justice. While science and philosophy viewed doubt as the foundation for discovering truth, in organized religion, it is treated as a threat. When people begin to question, they start to see the contradictions, injustices, and fabrications within the system. And that means power built on blind faith can collapse. For this reason, religions often associate doubt with sin, betrayal, or eternal punishment. Those who challenge doctrine or authority are quickly branded as heretics or blasphemers and subjected to harsh penalties. This mechanism transforms natural curiosity into fear, ensuring followers accept the order without resistance. In reality, doubt is not the enemy of truth. It is the enemy of those who fear losing power. A strong system has nothing to fear from questions. Only weak or contradictory systems must suppress them. The suppression of doubt itself is clear evidence that religion has become a tool of control, rather than a genuine path to meaning. Throughout history, religion has not only served as a source of spiritual comfort, but has also frequently been used as a tool to justify violence and oppression. Under the banner of divine will, countless crusades, religious wars, and witch hunts were carried out, bringing death and suffering to millions. Instead of promoting compassion and peace as often preached, religion was weaponized to legitimize the persecution of those labeled as heretics, infidels, or simply individuals who were different. In many cases, this false sense of sacredness gave violence a moral cover, leaving victims powerless to resist. On a societal level, religion has also been used to sanction systems of inequality, from slavery and rigid class hierarchies to the oppression of women and marginalized groups. When harsh laws are branded as sacred, they become chains that not only reinforce the power of rulers, but also condition the oppressed to accept their suffering as a fate decreed by God. In this way, religion does more than instill belief. It provides a moral language to mask violence, making it appear justifiable and even necessary. This represents one of the deepest contradictions between the message of love and peace in religious teachings and the bloody legacy that religion has left throughout history. One of the most effective ways religion maintains its power is by turning submission into a social and moral norm. From an early age, people are taught that obeying priests, religious leaders, or so-called divine laws is not just a duty, but also a measure of loyalty and faith. Over time, this submission is reinforced through rituals, doctrines, and punishments. The obedient are praised as models of devotion, while those who question or resist are labeled as heretics, traitors, or faithless. This system of rewards and punishments gradually transforms blind obedience into something seen as normal, to the point where few recognize it as a form of control. Once submission has been normalized, individuals become less likely to resist injustice or oppression, because they believe silence and obedience are moral virtues. This not only strengthens the authority of religious rulers, but also preserves deep inequalities within society. In other words, submission in religion is not just an individual act. It is a standardized mechanism, repeated across generations, until it becomes embedded in culture and collective belief. Looking back through history, it becomes clear that religion has rarely existed as a purely spiritual system of belief. More often, it has been wielded as a tool of power to control populations, justify violence, and preserve social orders that benefit the ruling elite. From its ties to politics, the deification of leaders, and the monopolization of knowledge, to the normalization of submission and the legitimization of inequality, religion has demonstrated its influence not only over spiritual life, but also across every aspect of society. This is not to say that religion brings no value. For many, it offers comfort and meaning. Yet beneath those values lies a structure of control, one that restricts freedom, enforces obedience, and often perpetuates oppression. Recognizing the power dynamics within religion is the first step toward breaking free from its chains. Only when people dare to question, to doubt, and to place reason above blind faith can society move closer to genuine freedom, justice, and true human dignity.